Hello, everybody. My name is Lindsay Lisney. I am part of the workshop committee, and I am from Minnewaca, North Dakota, and I am here to introduce Debalin Sarangi. He is a statewide extension weed specialist at the University of Minnesota with a major focus on weed management in corn and soybean systems. He is conducting research on integrated weed management to control herbicide-resistant weeds in Minnesota. Stay tuned for research updates from his lab in 2021 and onwards. He came to us 7 months ago, and he is from India. So Debalin, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Debalin Sarangi. I'm the assistant professor and statewide extension weed scientist at the University of Minnesota. And thanks for joining today. And today I'm going to talk about biology and management of common ragweed. So the purpose of this talk is to more focus on the biology of this weed species, because every weed, they're different for their biology and other different characteristics. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll link that biology with the management decision. And as Lindsay mentioned, that I like integrated weed management. I like to talk about that. I like to do research on that topic. So you will see some of the approaches that I will talk in my presentation. That is more like integrated management of common ragweed. So common ragweed, it's a native weed in the Northern America, and most of the mainland states, like 48 mainland states, and also Canada, they reported having common ragweed. And it's commonly known as hay fever weed, bitter weed, wild tansy, and sometimes they call it annual ragweed. So this is summer annual weed. So they grow in the summer, they flower and produce seeds, and then die in the fall. And common ragweed can grow up to 3 to 6 feet height, and it can produce more than 1 billion pollen grains per plant. So sometimes the people who are allergenic to pollens, they can get hay fever from common ragweed. And these characteristics is same with common ragweed as well as giant ragweed. So as I talked about giant ragweed, so here is the photograph of those two weed species. So the left side one is giant ragweed and the right side one is common ragweed. So the basic difference of these two weeds are their leaf. So look at this giant ragweed leaf, which is really bigger in size and definitely lobed, but bigger in size. However, common ragweed leaves are smaller in size and they're also lobed. And height-wise, giant ragweed can grow really tall, but common ragweed, we have seen about 4 to 5 feet maximum in Minnesota condition. So they share some of their biological characteristics, like they emerge early in the season, and I'll talk about that eventually. And their management practices are somehow similar because they share their biological characteristics. So every year we do survey of respondents from Minnesota and ask them about the troublesome broadleaf weed species they have on their farm. So this is the survey data from 2019. There are 361 respondents. And if you can see, like water hemp was the topmost troublesome weed in Minnesota, followed by giant ragweed, lamb's quarters, and then common ragweed. So these four weed species are most problematic broadleaf weeds in Minnesota. So you can understand that this weed has some importance regarding their economic value, because I mean, not in the positive sense, in the negative sense, because it can cause economic loss to your corn, soybean, and other crops. So some of the biological characteristics of common ragweed. So it has male and female flowers on separate locations on a same plant. So here in the right side photograph, you can see that male flower is on the top, and male flower produces a lot of pollens, and female flowers are somehow in the bottom of the male flower and in the axils here at the leaf base. So this is very important thing to know if you are collecting common ragweed or giant ragweed seeds for any purpose, like if you want to send that to me for resistance screening or something else. Don't make mistake harvesting the top part, because this has no seeds. This is the male flower and it has only pollens. The female flowers are always at the leaf base. So the plants begin to flower when days begin to shorten. So basically, you can expect summer solstice is the time. Around that time, the plant start flowering, and the flowering usually occurs for 30 days. And right after pollination, it takes about 50 days for seed maturation. So it takes longer time for maturing its seed. So you have more opportunity to control this weed, because after pollination, you have about 50 days until they form mature seeds. So you can still have opportunity to hand pull or rogue these plants. So each plant can produce 32,000 to 62,000 seeds per plant. So far, the literature reported about that. So that's also a good number of seeds, because if you consider you have a one resistant common ragweed, and which is full grown common ragweed, and that produce 60,000 seeds per plant. That is a big number for that seed. Those seeds will go to the soil seed bank, and next year you will see a lot of common ragweed coming up. So the plant that emerge earlier in the season, that usually produces more seeds, because they get more time to produce more vegetative biomass, and that helps them to produce more seeds. So this is a common ragweed life cycle, and this will be very interesting thing to know, because based on this curve, you will make a lot of decisions in your crop. So usually common ragweed germinates around springtime, like in Minnesota condition, I would say late April, early May. You will see a lot of common ragweed emergence. And this curve I got from Pacific Northeast, sorry, mid-Atlantic region, I'm sorry. So like East Coast, so they might have a little bit earlier germination of common ragweed. But in Minnesota situation, we have seen usually late April, early May, we saw a common ragweed emergence. And then they usually grow in the summertime, they flower in the fall, and then produce seeds, and they go into dormancy during winter time, because it needs the cold temperature for the seeds to get ready and break its dormancy and get ready for the next season. So it needs to go through this winter dormancy period. If you expose the seeds to high temperature all the time, they will lose their viability, and they will never, I mean, they will have less germination percentage. So that's why the winter dormancy is very important for this weed species to emerge in the spring. So while we are talking about emergence, here is a list of weed species, and this study was conducted in Iowa. So they had 23 summer annual weed species, and they listed them as early emerging, middle emerging, and late emerging species. So in the early emerging group, you can see common ragweed is there. And I told you this study was conducted in Iowa. So you can see like by end of May, majority of common ragweed emergence is done. So 90% of the emergence of common ragweed is done by end of May, and it has similar emergence pattern with the giant ragweed. And the left side photograph is the cotyledon leaves as well as the first two leaf of common ragweed. So it is very important to identify your weed before you go to control the weed species. So giant ragweed and common ragweed, they share some of their characteristics. When they're emerging, they have a slight difference in their cotyledon leaves, because common ragweed cotyledon is smaller than giant ragweed. Because just remember, giant ragweed seeds are bigger than common ragweed seeds, so their cotyledons are also bigger than common ragweed. And when you see the first leaf, then it is clear that whether it is giant ragweed or common ragweed, because giant ragweed seedling leaf will have just 3 lobes, whereas common ragweed you can see like 5 lobes here. So some other emergence information for common ragweed. So they emerge in the spring, and I told you already that 90% emergence is done by late May, and they like warm temperature so that they can emerge, but they don't like when the temperature goes beyond 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So if that's why the common ragweed like to emerge early in the season, they don't like to go beyond June or July when your temperature is more than 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And the seeds need lights for germination. So this is good. I mean, this is a biological weakness for them, and we'll talk about that, how we can exploit that thing. And seeds germinate near the soil surface. So as it needs the light, it does not emerge when you put the seeds below 2 inches soil depth. And 50% of the seeds lose their viability if they're just sitting on the soil surface in a year or so. So that means that is also another good news for us. If you just keep the common ragweed seeds on the soil surface, within a year you'll lose 50% of those seeds, and then 50% of them will emerge. So you have to manage those 50% seeds. Competitiveness. So right side photograph is a soybean field in Nebraska. I actually forgot to mention I got my PhD degree from University of Nebraska Lincoln, and during that time one of my colleague was working on common ragweed management in soybean. So I went with him a couple times and took some of the photos. So this is one of them. So you can see there is a pretty high pressure of common ragweed in this field, and those you can see the soybean lines, but they are pretty competitive. So my fellow student in Nebraska, he concluded that when common ragweed density is at 2, 6, and 12 plants per meter soybean row, that can cause 76, 91, and 95% yield reduction for soybean. And when common ragweed emerge either before or at the same time with soybean, the yield reduction is pretty high. So you can expect, if you have 2 to 4 weeks of weed-free period in soybean, and then if your common ragweed will emerge, then you'll have less yield penalty. Because just remember, like common ragweed does not like to emerge later in the season, like in June or July. So just early season common ragweed control can give you pretty good all along control for common ragweed and good soybean yield. So this is the site. My friend was conducting his research, and this is like, we have not seeded or anything. So this was glyphosate resistant common ragweed, and the grower was using Roundup every year, which is glyphosate basically. So growers was using Roundup every year and ended up having this problem like this. And you can see like and you can hardly see those soybeans there. I put some arrows so that I can point you those soybean rows. So in between these common ragweed forest, there are some soybeans that you can hardly see from this picture. So let's talk about herbicide resistance. What is herbicide resistance? It is the inherited ability of a plant to survive and reproduce when they are exposed to a herbicide dose which is lethal to the wild type. So basically, we are talking about the labeled dose of herbicide, and if they survive and produce seeds, that means they're resistant. Now, this is not that scenario in the US or any other country. It is global scenario. And look at this global number of weed species, which is resistant to different herbicide sites of action. So here, the graph is representing different herbicide sites of action. So group 2 is the ALS inhibitor, like uh, your classic pursuit, and those herbicides are group 2. And then you have group 5, 6, 7, which is your photosystem 2, like atrazine, metribuzin, and then group 9 here, which is your Roundup or glyphosate. So you can see that number of cases for resistance are increasing every year, and uh, there is no sign that it will stop somewhere. So it's increasing every year, and the number of weed species are every year adding up to this list. So let's check the herbicide resistant common ragweed in the United States. So we have single resistant population which are resistant to ALS inhibitor like classic, first red, pursuit, then photosystem 2 like atrazine, metribuzin, and EPSPS, which is Roundup basically, and PPOs like Reflex, Flexstar, Cobra. So we have single resistant populations present in the United States, as well as we have multiple resistant, where a single population is resistant to multiple herbicide sites of action group. And in this map, you can see all these red and green states. They have glyphosate, they have confirmed glyphosate resistant common ragweed. But these green states also confirmed any other multiple resistant population. So in those green state, let's take an example of Minnesota. We have population which is resistant to uh, glyphosate as well as ALS chemistry, which is classic and first rate. So that's why it is green. So they have additional resistance basically. So in Minnesota and North Dakota, I told you already that ALS and EPSPS resistant common ragweed have already been reported. So if you suspect any resistance on your farm, please contact us, because we are doing a survey as a part of University of Minnesota, and right now we are restricted to the samples only from Minnesota. So if you are living in Minnesota and if you have seen suspected resistance case for water hemp, giant ragweed, or common ragweed, please contact us. Here is my contact address, and we'll direct you how to collect the seeds and how to send it to us so that we can screen those seeds for resistance, and that will be totally free for the stakeholders. So in 2020, we received about 70 samples, and I think I would say 25% of them came from Red River Valley, and some of them are common ragweed. And right now we are screening water hemp samples in the greenhouse, And soon we'll start giant ragweed and common ragweed, because we placed them in a freezer, because they need to go through that winter cold treatment for their germination. But soon we'll start screening them as well, probably late spring or early summer. So how did we end up in this situation, in this resistance weed scenario? I mean, not only we are talking about common ragweed, with all the weed species, how did we end up in this situation? So just take a look at the county map where we grow corn and soybean. So this is from USDA 2019. And basically, what you can see is the counties that are growing corn, they are basically the same counties where we are having soybean acreages, except some of the counties in North Dakota and some of the counties in the South. But mostly you can see the counties are overlapping, and this is the mostly corn soybean belt in the Midwest. So now let's take a look at it. Look at the herbicide use, or let's take a look at it, pesticide use in corn and soybean. So in 2018, 97% of corn acreages was sprayed with herbicide. 99% of soybean acreages was sprayed with herbicides. So we are heavily relying on herbicide for weed management. And now let's take a look at the herbicide active ingredients that we are using. So the interesting fact is, in corn, 34% of the acreages are getting glyphosate treatment, and 75% of soybean acreages is getting glyphosate treatment. So if you are rotating corn with soybean, now combine these two things, and you are basically applying a lot of glyphosate to your farm. And that's how we ended up having glyphosate or Roundup resistant weed species, including common ragweed. So certain herbicide sites of actions are used frequently, and they are imposing a greater selection pressure on the weed populations. And multiple herbicide resistance is very common now, and it's basically called resistant treadmill, because you will stack different resistance every time you you have a selection pressure from certain herbicide, you stack the resistance. So that's why it is called resistance treadmill. So how can we control this weed, the common ragweed? So that will be probably the most important thing, because at farmers level, we want to know how can we manage these weed species, and probably in a sustainable manner, so that in few years we get rid of this weed. So first and foremost thing is identify the weak links. And to identify the weak links, you have to understand the biology of a weed species. That's why I spent a significant amount of time in my talk for talking about common ragweed biology. So this is one diagram I adapted from Dr. Bob Harchler from Iowa State. So if this is a summer annual weeds, let's take an example. If this is a common ragweed model, then they have seed bank. In the spring, they will start emerging. There will be seedlings, then adults, then seed production will happen. Then again, they will go back to seed bank, and seed bank will overwinter, and in the spring again they will emerge. So now we have these choke points in their growing season. Like, we can either use some preplant herbicides or preplant tillage in the spring to control them. Maybe there would be some post-emergence. So we have some choke points. So that's why we have to understand when to apply which treatments, and I will talk about some of them. And definitely don't rely on a single management tactic. If something works this year, that may not work in 2-3 years. So just rotate your management tactic. And seed bank management is very important for any weed species. So what are the biological weaknesses, what we have already figured out for common ragweed? Seeds require sunlight to germinate. So that means if you can do tillage, deep tillage, and if you can put the seeds deep into the soils, they will never emerge. And sometimes nighttime tillage may reduce seed germination because during nighttime, if you do tillage, the seeds will not be exposed to any sunlight. So we know that within a year, seed viability can decrease by 50% if we put the seeds on the soil surface. So seed bank management will be easier if we take some of the effective control measures. So if you have very effective herbicides or tillage, you can get rid of most of the seeds within a year. And then 90% emergence occur early in the season. So that could be beneficial for the weed as well as we can exploit that. How? Like if they emerge early, they can compete with your crop. So you have to have a weed-free period early in the season for avoid any kind of yield reduction. However, you can have some management options like pre-plant burn down herbicide, pre-plant tillage, and high residue cover crops. That can give you some satisfactory common ragweed control early in the season. What about planting date? So this is a research conducted at Beltsville, Maryland, and they checked the corn planting date along with different densities of 3 weed species. So we will focus on here. This is the common ragweed. So what you can see here is that when you delay your corn planting, the emergence is going straight down. So that means, and they by the way, they had early like they had spring tillage before they plant their corn. So that means when you plant 8th May and before that you had your tillage, you have about 200 seedlings per meter square. However, when you have 26th June corn planting, which is probably not feasible, but I'm just giving you example here. So then you have 0 common ragweed density because in the June, common ragweed does not like to emerge. So that's the key, like delay planting. So now question comes like how much we can delay. So that depends on the state to state, because in our situation, the things will be different than Maryland. And then you have to think about any kind of yield penalty for delay planting. But again, here is a tool for you. If you delay your planting, you can get rid of most of the common ragweed because they emerge earlier. Pre-plant herbicide. So this is one of the studies my friend conducted at Nebraska. So this is Optil Pro that was applied pre-plant, and you can see there was no common ragweed emergence here. So this is the center is the plot, okay? And when there is no pre-plant herbicide, there is common ragweed emergence. So pre-plant herbicides are really, they works really well for common ragweed. And that's same for giant ragweed as well. So this is again from my friend's data from Nebraska. So he tested several pre-plant herbicides, and the x-axis here showing different pre-plant treatments, and y-axis here is showing percent control of common ragweed, and this red dotted line is showing 90% control, because we want 90% or more control for any weed species, right? So here, if you see Liberty, Optil Pro, Authority product, Valor XLT, there 240 gramoxone and Sharpen plus 240, they're working really well. They're giving 90% or more control. However, Boundary, Envive, and Sharpen, they had a really low control of common ragweed in this study. And remember, this common ragweed was resistant to Roundup and ALS inhibitor. Now, in your envive, you have two ALS inhibiting herbicides along with flumioxazine. So basically, that's why we have less control of common ragweed for envive. So for when you are spraying herbicide, please consider a few things. One is not many post-emergence herbicide options are available for controlling common ragweed. And if you are applying post-emergence herbicide, try to apply less than 4-inch tall weeds. So here is a quick reference. Your regular cola can is 4.5 inch. So you have to spray when your seedlings is less than 4 inch. And then preplant or pre-emergence herbicides are the best choice for common ragweed control. And definitely scout your field after every herbicide applications for potential resistant weeds, and rotate your crops, because that will bring some flexibility in your herbicide program so that you can rotate your herbicide sites of action. Harvest weed seed control. So this is a relatively new approach for controlling some weed species. So basically you will target your weed seeds at crop harvest. So whatever the escapes, you'll target those seeds so that they will not go back to your seed bank. And think about this situation when you have a lot of weed pressure, and they can produce seeds, and that will go to the seed bank. So what you can do is probably during harvesting, you can take some of the approaches. I will just quickly review some of them and let you know. And what will happen is weed seeds will go inside your combine. Suppose you are harvesting soybean, that will go inside your combine, and then the weed seeds will be in the chaff stream. And then the weed seeds in the chaff stream you'll target to destroy them in different taking different measures. So look at the examples of different harvest weed seed control tactics. So mostly this technology is coming from Australia. Growers are adapting there very well, and the US growers are now very interested in them. So some of them are like chaff cuts, narrow windrow burning, bell direct system, chaff lining, and then cage mill or Harrington seed destructor. So I can tell you in the US already, the scientists have tested chaff lining and narrow windrow burning and cage mill. So the cage mill showed that it can reduce, it can destroy 96% of common ragweed seeds when it is going. So what is cage mill? So this is a cage mill. Two circle is rotating in other directions, like in 5,000 RPM. And when your weed seeds come into this cage mill, it will basically it will be destroyed, and it will make some like dust like particles. So this is how it destroy the weed seeds. And I have a quick video to show you from my colleague at University of Missouri, Dr. Kevin Bradley. So he is running his cage mill here in University of Missouri. And you can see, like, basically there is a one attachment in the behind of the combine, and when the weed seeds are harvested, they are destroyed, and it's basically becoming powder, and then it is spreading in the field. So that's how we can target the weed seeds at the harvest. So right now in Minnesota, I don't know if anyone has any cage mill, but at least I am trying to get one. If I can, I will let you know. But that may not happen in year or two. So anyways, so farm to export system, weed management is not a one season thing. It is you have to start from very beginning until your harvest. So we produced a series of video, and you can go to University of Minnesota Extension Crops and you can watch those videos. Or if you have access to this link, you can just click on that and you will have 8 videos, and those are the series, starting from making your decision to harvest. And those are like very short, like 4 or 5 minutes video, and I'm sure you'll enjoy that, and they're really good education materials. So with that, I would just say diversification is the key. And if the problem of herbicide resistance is addressed only by herbicide, the evolution will win. So integrating weed biology knowledge with management practices is very important. So with that, I will just end my presentation, and I will take any questions if you have. And here is my contact address. You can always send me an email, and you can follow updates from the research from my lab at UMN Weeds Twitter account. And I'll be happy to take any questions and answer.